Hi Lacrosse fans, welcome back to episode number 6 of the Sticks and Picks Lacrosse podcast presented by Lacrosse Unlimited. Lacrosse Unlimited offers the best equipment, apparel, and lacrosse footwear since 1990. Check out lacrosseunlimited.com for all your lacrosse needs. In today's episode, we talk to the voices of the MSL's Century 21 Peterborough Lakers and of the OHL's Peterborough Petes. We talk about Peterborough as a sports community, the recent Man Cup championships, the Peterborough Pete's success this past season, and even the story about a lacrosse play-by-play announcer being banned from the visiting team's arena in playoffs. We also talk about working for Halifax in the NLL and how awesome their fan base is out east. Today's guests are the voices of the Ontario Hockey League's Peterborough Petes and the Major Series Lacrosse Peterborough Century 21 Lakers. A big welcome to Scott Arnold and Pete Dalliday.
Hey, Will. Hey, Foxy. How you doing, guys?
Doing good. Scotty, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us on here. I saw you guys teasing this show online and excited to be on here.
Yeah, I'd say, for the process that we've been going through, it's gone relatively big pretty quick. We were able to lock in Lacrosse Unlimited as our presenting sponsor, so I'm going to give them that quick shout out right there, so that they're happy because we love having them. But obviously, I've had a pretty good relationship with both of you, and both of you have had the chance to call Will in a bunch of hockey games. So we're excited to have you guys on, and we think it's going to be interesting conversations. Definitely going to be different than talking from a pro player perspective. We get to see what you guys see from up in the box and when you see it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being on the other side and just sitting back a little bit and letting you guys run the show.
So we're going to kind of take a dive into right into it and talk about how you guys got involved with the game of lacrosse. And I know Peterborough is a big lacrosse community, so can you guys just kind of talk about that?
Yeah, it's you're right, Will. Man, it's hard to grow up in Peterborough and not get involved in the game of lacrosse. It's so huge here, as you guys know, and it's just what you did back in the day. You played hockey in the winter and lacrosse, and there was no sort of 12 months of hockey. Like, you literally put the hockey gear away back then, and you got the lacrosse gear out probably a month later. And yeah, I got into it when I was real young. My uncle played for the original Philadelphia Wings way back in the 70s, back when those guys were playing full 65 games a year, I think, schedule, when they all lived down there full time. It was quite you got to imagine the mid 70s. It was pretty wild times. And so Pete Gearin, he got me into the game. My brother and I played. My uncle Jim Gearin was also another great player that played junior and senior here and headed out west to play eventually. And so just in the family, my dad actually never played lacrosse. He was never a lacrosse guy as a kid or growing up, but certainly encouraged it. And I'm so old. We were wearing green and yellow uniforms with the junior Lakers back in those days. So I'm aging myself a little bit, but some good times for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Scotty talk about your age. I'm not going to do that. I respect you. Scotty, why don't you tell us how you got to the game? I know it's kind of similar. I mean, everyone in Peterborough kind of gets started the same way, but why don't you talk about it and kind of how your career went?
Yeah, the old man is who got me into the game. I'm not sure where he found this wooden stick for me, but 5 years old, and it was called Peanut at the time. So signed me up, and I think there was age 3 to 6. It was quite the age range. So Brad Self was there, his older brother Scott Self. Shawnee Evans was running around at age 2 or 3, and Brad and I were the only ones with wooden sticks, and we were teammates our entire lives together after that. And we were joined by a great cast of characters. Scotty Evans joined us a couple years later, Jeff Ralph, and just a great crew of guys that, it was so fun to play with. Kyle Laverty, who was the National Lacrosse League penalty minute record holder up until a few years ago. So fun to just be a teammate of his and going through his junior career, watching him. I like the rough stuff, so I'll say it. I liked watching him tee off on guys, so that was pretty good. But I played 4 good years at junior, then I kind of lost interest a little bit. Ended up moving to Aurelia and just hung out on the lake with a few of the lads, and never got back into the playing side of things, and eventually picked up a microphone, though, a few years later.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty, we all remember your one memorable goal in your junior career. And
it was such a good goal.
Why don't you give us a quick play-by-play of your goal?
No, it was a pretty good goal. It was a big moment. I didn't play a lot. I was on the bench for most of junior. That's what happens in Peterborough. I mean, I played with Brad Self, Scott Evans, Dustin Hunt. We were sort of the top guys. I used to be a scorer, believe it or not, getting a few goals. But in junior, you're playing with Steve Evans, Rick Heffernan, and all these guys. And I found myself on the bench for 2-3 years. So I got my opportunity in my 4th season. I think we were up like 11-2. So they decided to throw me out there and let's get Arnie a goal. And it was against this goalie that I had a huge feud against. We played him against provincials a few years earlier. I think we were in Bantam at the time. And I ended up on a breakaway, throwing one right between his eyes, and upsetting Selfer and Evie and a few of my teammates. They were pretty mad because we only had a 2-goal lead. But that's the goalie, to fast forward, that's the goalie I ended up scoring my only junior goal on. So I have a feud with him all through minor, and that's my lone goal. So it was a great one. I'll always remember it.
Jeez, that's fantastic. I love that. I love how you kept that grudge. Pete, obviously you went on to play a couple of years of senior lacrosse with the Lakers, and then you got into broadcasting, and now as more recently as the play-by-play guy with the newly founded Halifax Thunderbirds, formerly known as the original Rochester Nighthawks. How did you get into obviously I think it probably would have been radio to start, and then going into color commentating and play-by-play?
Yeah, so it I grew up around it. My dad used to call the games for the Lakers way back when, and the junior team when they were winning Minto Cups. It seemed like every year, and I was going to the rink to watch all those. It was fantastic. And he'd go out west and do the games, the Man Cup games back then. And so it was just in the blood. And so I continued to sort of keep the family tradition going on the lacrosse side of things, and actually started doing games on the internet way back, like probably in the early 2010, around there, back before the networks were kind of doing the games, Stamper and those guys, I guess sort of just before that time. And then just the gig came up in Peterborough with the Lakers, and started doing play-by-play there because I knew the game a little bit, so it was a good fit, and everything was starting to build. The crowd started to build, and then Scotty came on board that too. So it's just been a good run. I mean, if you want to get into making a few extra bucks as a side hustle, Peterborough is a good town to do it in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember after games going back and watching the replays on TV and hearing you guys call the game and waiting to hear what Scotty would say about me, because I know he always had something up his sleeve. Scotty, why did you talk about how you got into it? I know I remember back when I first started junior, you were traveling with us on the bus doing radio for the Junior Lakers.
Yeah, it came together in 2012. The Lakers were playing Langley in the Man Cup. Pete was working for a different radio station at the time, and he had me on before each Man Cup game as the Lakers insider-outsider. That's what we dubbed me, and we would just talk for about 5-10 minutes before every Lakers game, trying to hype the crowd up. Twitter was just coming out at that time too, so I was being a bit of a disturber on Twitter, and being your typical hometown Peterborough fan, I didn't think this was going to lead to anything, so I'm being pro Peterborough, of course. I'm chirping Langley. I'm taking some pictures, behind the scenes, and really stirring the pot up. And it's getting heated back and forth with, some of the Langley guys who I'm actually good friends with. Ryan McMichael now. He was on the team, but apparently they were taking some offense to some things that were going on, and I was just in my own little world here. So here I am tweeting away live updates, and then doing the radio thing with Pete. Well, then all of a sudden a sports radio station comes to town and approaches me, and basically says it wasn't local. It was, I don't know if you remember Marissa and Jemmy, who used to do In Lacrosse We Trust. So she was doing the Lacrosse Radio Network at the time, And she approaches me and says, "Hey, I love what you're doing on Twitter. I see in your picture you're holding a microphone. Are you also a broadcaster?" And I just said, "Why? What's up?" She goes, "Well, I have a job in Brampton tonight. The regular guy can't make it. I was just hoping that you had a background." I said, "Where do you need me and what time?" So I drove to Brampton that day with my buddy, called my first ever game, got a full-time job doing the Durham Turf Dogs the next day. Sports radio station came into town, decided to set me up with the junior team. The job at Cogeco opened up with Pete that same year. So everything just snowballed after that 2012 Man Cup, just chirping online on Twitter, doing live updates and trying to stir up the hometown crowd. That's how it all started.
Yeah, no, it's definitely awesome when you look at your social media accounts and kind of getting all those updates, especially from the more recent Man Cup teams. And can you guys just kind of touch on what the Lakers mean to the Peterborough community?
Well, they're huge. I mean, it feels, first of all, from a business point of view, it fills the Memorial Center for an extra 20 to 30 dates a year, right? So that's been huge. And sort of that all changed when the Memorial Center got renovated in the early 2000s, like 2005, and they got air conditioning, and all of a sudden they got good on the floor as well. And it was this really cool sort of combination where it just really worked. And now it is, now it's the place to be on Thursday nights in the summertime. It's tradition. People, especially a lot of people that aren't necessarily Pete's fans. There are some that cross over, but there are people that are just Lakers fans, and that is their night out. 15, 20 nights a year. And people I don't recognize. And I know most people in town, when I walk around a Lakers crowd, I'm like, "Man, I didn't know you were like even a sports fan." And they're like, "No, we love our Lakers." And they've become so big. It's been fantastic to watch. I mean, I was around playing in the days where we almost lost the team. Teddy Higgins and Ronnie Keast, guys like that came into our dressing room and says, "Guys, we may fold, but if you guys commit to playing, I'll take over and I'll pay the bills." He wasn't the owner at the time or anything. He came in and we finished the season. And if we hadn't have, and if it wasn't for Teddy Higgins and Ron Keast and some other guys, we may not be talking about the Peterborough Lakers right now, because once you lose a franchise, you may never get it back, right? So that was sort of a real turning point, and here we are probably 25 years later, and the average attendance is 3,000 fans, and it's just so important to the city that if we don't get a season in this year, and what happened last year with having to play it at the Evinrude and only 700 fans a game getting in, it's going to be a couple tough years without our regular lake show, as they call it here.
Scotty, what do you have to say about that? Kind of talk about what the impact the senior team has had with you and on the community, and kind of, I guess the juniors too. I mean, as of recent, I know it hasn't been as strong, but I remember back when I was playing and we were, going to the second and the Ontario finals, where the house was not packed like the Lakers, but probably similar to, I'm going to chirp them a little bit, similar to the pizza crowd a little bit, maybe.
You know what, Foxy, we were getting there. We weren't getting Pete's crowds, but that last year, maybe the second last year that I was doing radio, that Six Nations series, we got the good crowds for that one. You guys got the good crowds. I didn't. I was just sitting there calling the game, but some great crowds for that one. And we really started to gain some traction, I thought, in terms of hyping it up. And then, unfortunately, a couple losing seasons and not making the playoffs sort of made those fans disappear. But that junior team, when they get winning and they have those deep playoff runs, the fans get right behind them. They love it. They're a bit of a bandwagon fan base there. They want to wait and make sure that the juniors are going to have a good team before they kind of jump on. But they get good crowds too, but nothing like the seniors, of course. And that's what every junior player, I think, strives to try to get to, is that level to play in front of that 3,000 plus crowds. And I love it because outside of the arena here downtown in Peterborough, I love walking around downtown, and there's Laker signs in all the stores. People are recognizing you, coming up to you saying, "Hey, what do you think they're going to do this Wednesday or this Thursday, whatever playoff game's coming up?" And everyone wants to talk about Lakers. The city bus has the team painted on the side of them, the Man Cup on the back of the city bus painted with all their championship years. So this entire city gets behind it like no other. And imagine if we had 6 teams with the heart of these Peterborough Lakers fans, how big this league would be in terms of, all those diehard fans that are involved. But unfortunately, outside those Peterborough Memorial Center walls, the crowds are few and far between for some reason. But like Pete said, that used to be that way at the Memorial Center. When I was a teenager, we used to sit up in the top row behind the net, and you'd sneak some drinks in, have some chewing tobacco, and you'd be sitting there watching the game, and all they'd do is stamp your hand. They wouldn't give you a ticket or anything. You were just walking through, and it was awesome. At the time, you just thought this is pretty cool. And then all of a sudden you fast forward to that 2004 Man Cup championship, and then 3,000 people in there, and you thought, wow, I thought 50 fans was pretty cool. This is unbelievable. And here we are today, and hoping that this season takes off, because they really need it after that year at the Evinrude. But like everybody, I don't know the answers. We don't know what's going to happen.
Let's talk about that for a second. Obviously, for people who aren't familiar with the Peterborough situation last year, Peterborough had some renovations that had to be done to the Memorial Center that were deemed had to be done right away. Wasn't a fan favorite for a lot of people, but led to the Lakers playing out of the Evinrude Center. For people who don't understand, the Evinrude Center, go to your local hockey rink, and that's probably what you're looking at there. Talk about kind of the impact you guys saw. Like again, it's different from a player's perspective. For a player, I mean, you're playing the game of lacrosse. That is what it is. If there's, most guys will know, because most of these guys play in the NLL. Fan bases differ throughout, so you're used to playing in front of a huge fan base or a small fan base. So I mean, lacrosse is lacrosse, but when you look at how big of an impact the Lakers have on their community, talk about kind of the community outlook, I guess you say, or your guys' outlook from being up in the stands, of how big of a difference that made.
Well, what ended up happening is, because it was almost like a lottery to get tickets to get into the game, right? It turned into a situation where I think some people just got ticked off, like that they didn't get tickets, and their buddies got tickets, and their uncle got tickets, but they didn't get tickets. And so now you've got the fans going up against each other, getting a little bit bitter. But I think at the end of the day, as you played there, I mean, I thought the atmosphere actually was kind of cool. It was a little more intimate. You could actually hear a little bit more what the players were saying. Scott was down in his little perch in the corner down there. I was practicing physical distancing a year and a half before it became a thing. I was in a booth basically by myself in a glass booth. I felt like a fish up there, like an animal or something. But I was in there. But at the end of the day, I mean, from our perspective, there was more people watching our broadcast day, Scotty, because they couldn't get tickets. So not that we have ratings in community television, but I imagine if we did, they would have been at an all-time high, because that was the only really way you could watch the game at that point if you didn't have a ticket.
Yeah, certainly a lot more people were watching. They had it on the big screen in the banquet hall in the arena. I think there was a couple people watching on that screen as well. But no, it was weird for me. I found it odd because, as Pete said, he was up there in the glass, and I'm down below all by myself in a sense. I couldn't see him. I couldn't really see the crowd. So I couldn't really gauge what was happening behind me in terms of fans. I had the visiting team's dressing room right beside me, which regular season, it was fine. I had to walk by them to go get interviews on the floor, and I had to cross their paths many times. But come playoff time, it was just odd. They didn't want to let me by, obviously, because it's a heated series. So Six Nations, who I get along with better than any other team in the league, I trying to get by these guys, and they're opening doors, making sure I can't get through, putting their coolers there. And it was just a game within a game that I wasn't even technically involved in. So it was weird. It was the best seat I've ever had, right down in the corner. But I want to be back up in the booth with Pete, or at least somewhere where I can see him, a one up, one down, where we're maybe facing each other. It was just weird. I can't wait to get back to the Memorial Center. But it was an experience.
Pete, I want to kind of go to you here now in a new adventure for yourself with the Halifax Thunderbirds in their inaugural season. Talk about kind of that atmosphere down there. I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to travel for that game when they had their home opener, but I mean, there's not many teams that sell out for an inter-squad scrimmage. So kind of talk about how Halifax has developed into, already in their first year, one of the top fan bases in the league.
It's been quite a ride. yeah, it's unfortunate you weren't there for that night because Scotty actually was there that game as well. He was filling in for Pat Gregoire on opening night, and I'm kind of glad he wasn't in a roundabout way because I was sicker than a dog for the home opener, but we got through it together. But first of all, I just wanted to say, my thoughts and my prayers, everything going out to the people of Nova Scotia. It's just been a terrible 4 days. Looking back to the tragic events that happened just outside of Halifax. And so, I've become friends with some, a lot of people down there, obviously, and there are some Peterborough natives and a lot of Ontario people that are living down there. So I just wanted to say that and let those people know we're thinking about them. But no, it was unfortunate the season came to an end for a lot of reasons for everybody, but something special was happening in Halifax, and it all started, you're right, with that sort of inter-squad game, that big purple and orange game they had, and the fans were just got into it right from the get-go. They have done such a great job on and off the floor. You can talk about the lacrosse side of things and what Micah Kersey has done, and Kurt Stiers as the GM, and that speaks for itself. I think they're at 8-4 the last before the season got suspended there. And off to a great start, but off the floor, just it continued to grow, and just walking over on game nights. And we started to see more and more people downtown and in the mall on our way over to the rink wearing the Thunderbirds gear. And there was purple everywhere on a Saturday night. I'm like, this is incredible. And really a real cool atmosphere there. I think part of it is the East Coast lifestyle. They just, they took to the game. They took to the hits. They took to the, drinking the Thunder Brews in the stands and having a great time. It turned out to a great a night out, and they did a great job. They do a great social media job there as well. One of the best in the league, I think, what they do online. And hopefully we can get back at it and get back out there. I know Pat Gregoire misses his chowder that he liked to have after the game, and the boys really got into the seafood and stuff. So it's too bad you missed it. Next time you have to get there because the food is fantastic and famous for their donaires as well.
Yeah, no, we definitely send our prayers out to the people of Nova Scotia and everyone that was affected with that tragic event this past week. But looking back on the NLL season, it was clear that Halifax was a great team, and the fan support from what I saw when I was watching on BR Live was incredible, and it was pretty special to see for a first-year team. So I think that was pretty cool for the game of lacrosse itself.
Well, and you guys will appreciate this. It's gonna have a huge effect on lacrosse in general in Nova Scotia. They have so many grassroots programs, which I know most teams do. But guys like Kyle Jackson, he's down there full time doing a lot of clinics with the kids, even going into seniors' homes and trying to grow the game at that level. It's amazing. And then a lot of guys will fly down early and spend time doing clinics in the schools and stuff. And I think that the province itself, I think it might take a few years, but you wait and see. 5, 6, 7 years, Nova Scotia is going to start competing with the Ontarios and the BCs and the Quebecs and some of the other provinces at the minor level that are real strong. And that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, certainly. I think that'll be very exciting for Canadian lacrosse for many years to come. So right now we're going to get into a little fun here, battle of commentators. So basically Jake's going to take you through some kind of little sayings or questions, and you guys got to answer who's better at which, or which guy does this better, something along those lines.
Okay.
So Jake will take you through it.
Right.
Yeah, so this is usually a segment that we're going to work towards when we have brothers on. We have a couple brother duos who are set to come, but we figured you guys are basically like brothers in the booth, so we'll see what you guys have to say about each other.
Well, we used to steam at the YMCA back in the day together, so that's as close as you want to get, I guess.
All right.
Well, other people there too.
I didn't notice.
All right, so the first question is, who dresses the best? Who has the better game day suits, game day dress?
Scotty does. Scott puts a way more effort, and he's got a bigger budget than I do. So he is the snappier dresser. There's no question.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say it.
I was gonna say you have that pretty. I remember I saw a picture on Twitter. I was looking up stuff, and you had that Spin Chicklets Christmas hoodie, Pete. That looked pretty good on you.
Yeah, that's I got a good hoodie game. I'll be honest with you. I got a son that he's got his own shout out to the Dallar store. He's got his own online business, so he's able to provide me with some pretty good hoodies. So I'll take that. I'll take the hoodie game. Scotty's got the shirt and tie game pretty good though.
All right, we'll go to the next one, and we'll let Scotty answer this one first. Who's a better interviewer?
Depends what you're doing. There's different styles for different things. If it's somebody that we both know people, so I think we're both good at doing our thing. If I know somebody, I'm going to maybe interview them in a different way and get something out of them that Pete might not, and vice versa. And I think that's what makes us the good duo. I love Pete's interviews. Obviously, he's got a ton of experience, and he's interviewed a lot of great people outside of the sporting world even. So, I mean, anytime there's a Dalliday interview that gets posted online, I'm going to be one of the first ones to watch that.
Scott is the only one of the two of us that needs security down by his interview area. He's had a couple physical altercations in the lacrosse world, I think, Scott. There's also the time, was it Ryan McMichael came in post-game out of the blue to over some concerned comments or something? I don't know.
He had kicked a guy. He kicked a guy in a fight, and so I called him out on it on air, and then he wanted to talk to me about it. And so he was waiting by the bench, and so I said, get on air then. And so we brought him in on live, and he goes, you chirping me? And I said, well, you kick somebody. And that made for a great finish to that game.
Yeah, and then anyone that's from Orangeville or Brampton area, I think Scott also needs security sometimes around him for interviews.
We'll get into that later, Scotty. Don't I got a story I need you to tell later. Don't worry. Who does better pregame prep?
Scott. Well, see, here's the deal. The color guy, the analyst has to do more prep. I mean, you know what? Like, every game is different, so you don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a winner. There's going to be a loser. But as a play-by-play guy, I mean, it unfolds in front of you, and you can't, I'm a big, as Scott knows, I like to, get the numbers and the names and match them up. I take my pride in that, but I call it as I see it, whereas the color guy has to, because there's long stretches in lacrosse where you don't even have a chance to get a word in. And then when you do, you got to be ready. So you got to have something there. So I'll give that one to Scott, but, not to take away from anything that play-by-play guys do, but you really can't do a ton until, the ball drops or the puck drops or whatever the case may be.
Having said that, though, you never come unprepared, obviously. You say the names, the numbers, all that sort of stuff. You've always got your pen, your paper. You've always got a few stories, whether it's something local. You always have something with the visiting team because there's going to be visiting fans watching. So you do all your prep, whether it's a restaurant or a fan from that area that's going to be watching. If we don't know a name, you go over to the visiting booth and make sure you talk to the radio guys. So you do a lot of prep as well. And I think that's, again, what makes us a great team.
All right. Who is the bigger super fan when it comes to teams, maybe players, when you're doing stuff like that?
Scott.
I'm the most neutral guy in the world. I sit there and call this stuff.
I would say no, not to be funny or anything, but Scott, I think, is he's passionate about guys that he knows, and Jake, I'll say that I know you were kidding around earlier, but he he's a big fan of yours. He was in junior. He was always pumping your tires, I guess, as they say, right? Which is great. And I think there's other guys as well. I think Scott is just really, and why wouldn't you be when you play with guys like Brad Self and Scott Evans and Shawnee was around when he was younger as well, like. They're almost like family to you. So when you're doing their games, it's hard to hold back a little bit on how you feel about them and how talented they are. But I don't know. I don't think we do Pete's games, we do Laker games, but I wouldn't say you could call us homers. We've been called that a few times on Twitter. We won't name names, but certainly it may come across that way. But when the Lakers score and it's an overtime goal or it's a big goal in the third period and the crowd is going crazy, you feed off that. So maybe it comes across that way sometimes. But it is what it is, man. At the end of the day, we're trying to grow the sport of lacrosse and hockey as well. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, I like how you use the word passionate. I am pretty passionate with certain guys. I know when Scott Evans used to play, I used to want to jump right on the floor. Not like he needed any protection. The toughest guy I have ever been around in my life. But anytime he was in some rough stuff, I'm in the booth, my blood is boiling, and you just felt the energy levels going through the roof there. I wouldn't say that make me a super fan by any means, but I certainly lose my head in the game sometimes and need to step back and realize I'm not on the floor.
Yeah, no, I've seen it from both of you. I've heard it from both of you. I wouldn't say neither you're homers or anything like that, but I mean, that just comes from growing up in an area too, where, you know, if you're commentating for that team, you're going to get excited at certain points. But I would say you both are pretty professional in your commentary. Let's see this. Who's the better lacrosse player? Who's the better hockey player?
Well, numbers don't lie. You said Scott only had one goal. Now I only had about 8, but the math is in my favor there. But Scott, on the hockey side, I saw him play in a 3-on-3 tournament, and he was wearing an old bucket from 1982. I think it may have been one of those old lacrosse lids, and barely had any steel on his skates. So I don't know. He was holding his own, though. He was doing all right. He wore the maroon and white. He played some AAA hockey coming up. So I'll give it to Scott, I guess. I'll give Scotty that one as far as the hockey is concerned.
No, I've seen Pete's lacrosse shot. He's on TikTok. I don't know if you guys are on TikTok, but Pete's on there. He's actually using a beer can or a soda can. I don't know what kind of can. I won't assume what was in that can, Pete. It
was gin.
Oh, excellent. He took that out with the lacrosse shot. I couldn't do something like that. So I'll give the nod to Pete there. And as I said, I finished off my lacrosse career on the bench, standing there. So you got to be better than that, Arnie.
I don't know if you, Foxy, if you saw our commercial we did with Holden Catoni a couple years ago.
Yeah, I literally, It's funny you mentioned that. I probably watched it a couple times back to back here right before you guys came on.
Oh, yeah. So it was a fun promo we did for your TV. And we set it up so it had us, Scott and I, just firing shots trying to hit a post. And we weren't supposed to hit a post because then Holden would come in and nail it. Scott didn't have to try. He was literally shooting and missing. I had to try to miss the net. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I was also using my wrong hand, Pete. You forgot to add that in. But
I didn't know you were a lefty. I thought you were a righty. Sorry.
Well, my whole career I played right, and then I just found out I was supposed to be left the other day.
All right, finally here, who has the better Twitter game?
Pete Dalliday. He loves his Twitter. I think he's about 5 or 6 tweets a day, which is that's a little better than me. I'm a maybe once a week guy. I read it and I scroll through it, but I find Pete's active with the community. He's active with local businesses. He's active with sporting teams that he covers, and I see his name everywhere. So I'll give that one to Pete.
Well, I'll take it. What is good about Scott's Twitter game is it's if you know his sense of humor and some of the quick tweets he responds to, they're pretty funny. I mean, he's a good follow for sure. Scott Arnold 12, because the first 11 Scott Arnolds were taken by the time he got on Twitter.
I was late to the party.
I think Ryan McMichael's really going to like the shout-outs. Uncle Frick will be thrilled to hear his name on here.
Oh,
he's
man.
A beauty.
Yeah.
We're good friends with him. And we talked about that segment, him coming on, but I stay in touch with Ryan. We always talked about, when he was out west, and he's back there now, but that East Coast, West Coast rivalry when he was with Langley, and he always wanted to do a radio show. So I'm sure he's probably hit you guys up and said, hey, your first guest needs to be Uncle Frick. So I bet he's pulling at your coattails, but he's an entertaining fellow. Leave him till the end when you're out of guests and you just need to pull somebody out of your back pocket last minute. But he'll be there for you.
He was the first guy to comment on Facebook. I'm just going to say that.
He's a beaut.
Hey, man, I'm aging myself again, but I had the privilege of playing against his dad. He's quite a bit older than me. I was just a young player, but just to be able to say you played against Scotty McMichael, a legend there in Brooklyn, is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. He definitely is a legend in Brooklyn. We're going to change a little bit topics here. We're going to go into the kind of the hockey side, the Peterborough Petes, where I know you guys from. This past season, the team was doing so well for probably the first time in a long time, especially like for my playing days. But how does that kind of affect the team and like their morale when they're doing so well this year and for their destiny to be kind of cut short?
I think a guy like Nick Robertson is hurt the most. Every player, I shouldn't center one guy out. Every player is hurting in their own way. But here's a guy who's on the heels of 60 goals, the first Peterborough Pete in 27 years to hit the 50-goal plateau. And then he's just a handful of goals away from becoming just the 80th player in league history to get 60. And he's the type of player who, he loves to play, loves to win, loves to score. So I think for him, it was probably the toughest for him. But, all these guys who are hoping to maybe finish their career, some of them aren't coming back, and they're hoping to finish their careers on a high note, now have to finish it by being told back on that March before that Sudbury game on Thursday. That's how they found out their season was over, by being told, hey, there's no game tonight. We don't know if there's going to be a season. And that's your last memory at the rink, is right there being told that go home, boys, we're not playing Sudbury tonight. So that's a tough way to go out for anybody.
Yeah, it was tough. And I think what made it tougher is the Petes had a really, going back to those renovations we were talking about earlier that knocked the Lakers out of the Memorial Center. The Petes had to start their season. How many games on the road did they play, Scott, in a row on the road to start the year? Like it was like 11. It was like
the first 14 or something. Yeah, 11 or 14. Yeah.
And they got through that really well. And I think this was one of the closer knit teams in a long time. And as you say, well, when you were playing in the league against the Petes, they were struggling and they couldn't beat Oshawa at all. Or this year they started to play well. They had a few teams numbers, including Ottawa, who was one of the top teams in the league. So it was looking real good. And boom, just like that, it came to an end. I mean, it did for 19 other teams in the league as well, but it was disappointing for sure. For a small market team and a team that's kind of community owned, it's been a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I'm sure that was for sure frustrating for not only the players, but the fans as well. Speaking about Oshawa a little bit there, Jeff Toohey was my general manager, and he's a salt of the earth guy. He's one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in the sport. And just kind of talk to what Jeff means to the Peterborough Petes still to this day.
I'll let Pete talk. Pete knows Jeff very well there, and you guys have a great relationship, Pete?
Yeah, well, all three of us get along real well, and Jeff now, I just moved to his end of town, and I see him out for his walks, and he says to say hello, Will, and said nothing but great things about you. And Foxy, if he knew you, then I'm sure he'd say great things about you as well. But we were talking before the podcast about how Jeff built that Memorial Cup team at Oshawa that you were on, and he wasn't around to see it. They let him go sort of just before that, but that was his team. He built it. I don't know how many deals they made that year. I'm sure they tinkered a bit, but that was basically Jeff's team. So he should have a Memorial Cup ring. He should be one of the next guys, in my opinion, to get honored by the Peterborough Petes with a banner up into the rafters. He put in more years than anyone there, and he's just overall, as you say, he's just a fantastic guy. If you have something going on in your life, if you're a youngster that plays for him, or if you're a player that played for Jeff 20 years ago, he's always there for you as a human being. So, certainly, we can't say a whole lot right now, but I'm sure we'll hear more from Jeff as he's doing well in Kingston right now. But I think anyone would be crazy not to hire a Jeff Toohey back in the NHL someday. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you said, he's a great guy, and I'm sure kind of the sky is his limit for him in the game of hockey. Nick Ritchie and Hunter Garland, both former lacrosse players, both currently professional hockey players, one in the National Hockey League with Nick Ritchie, and Hunter Garland in the ECHL with Florida Everblades. Kind of talk about their hockey career at the Petes, and like they played lacrosse growing up. So do you think that kind of had any involvement with how well their hockey careers turned out?
I think it certainly helped with the toughness. Nick Ritchie especially. I remember when he came into town, I knew of his brother out of Orangeville, and he came here, and his physique was, he had that nice physical size. You knew he was going to be a big player. I didn't know he had the lacrosse background at the time, but I thought, all right, here's going to be a grinder. And my memory of him is banging and crashing and smiling. Whenever somebody says Nick Ritchie, that's the image that goes in my head. Just this big guy with a smile on his face, just banging into the corners. But he was the fan favorite. I know a lot of people liked him here. My father, who he's a writer, and he got to follow the team around. He had unprecedented access the one year, and he said Nick Ritchie was just the biggest joker and one of the funnest guys to be around. He was always pulling pranks and doing things on road trips just to have fun. And I think that's how I'll always remember him in Peterborough, is that just that fun guy who was always smiling, but could knock your head off if he wanted to as well.
How about Hunter Garland?
Well, Hunter, we saw here for a little bit. He didn't have a full career here in Peterborough, but first, he finished off, had a great couple seasons here after he came over from Guelph, I think it was, and and great to see him doing well. And I'm just a big fan. I think we briefly went into it quickly, but I'm a big fan of putting the hockey bag away in March and having a little rest and then getting into lacrosse. I mean, it worked for a lot of guys. A guy like Steve Larmer, should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but played lacrosse in the summertime. He wasn't at the Kinsman playing summer hockey. He wasn't, it's just a different era, I guess. I understand that, but I'm a big two-sport guy. It doesn't have to be hockey and lacrosse, but I think there's so many things that you can take from one to the other. You learn how to take a hit. You learn to maybe toughen up a little bit as well, Scott mentioned, on the lacrosse floor, and I think that helps on the ice. And I'm a big fan of putting one stick away and picking up another one. And your podcast is called Sticks and Picks, so it's sort of a perfect combo in our world. There's lots of guys in Peterborough, the Johnsons, the Wassons, the Evans family, all fantastic hockey players, but all great lacrosse players as well.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I mean, you look at some of the biggest hockey players in history and some really familiar names. I mean, Gretzky, obviously the biggest, but you look at like Shanahan and, Tavares nowadays, all these guys who had huge lacrosse careers growing up and even bigger hockey careers. So there's a clear correlation between the two. And I know numerous of them have basically said, if lacrosse paid what hockey did, I would have played lacrosse.
Yeah, that's interesting, because as much as I love hockey, there's just something about picking up the lacrosse stick that just makes me feel really, or walking into a Lakers game. As much as I love the Petes, and there's just something special about it, and it's true. If they both paid the same, man, wouldn't it be a good thing? That would be amazing. Even half.
I would have chosen lacrosse in a heartbeat in a second.
Yeah, it's something neat about it, eh? Well, it's just something special.
Yeah, for sure. It's just that battle and that grind that I love so much, and I'll never trade my hockey memories for anything.
Nope.
But it would have been interesting to see where my lacrosse career would have taken me as well.
Well, there's still time for you.
So we're going to get into a little story time here. I'm going to ask Mr. Scotty Arnold a question here, and he can kind of go into it. I've never met a radio guy who's been banned from so many arenas.
Just one.
Sorry, the one. I remember the one. You want to talk about how that came about? And because I remember that was quite a fiasco in my junior career.
Yeah, it turned out to be a pretty big ordeal. You guys were getting set for a playoff series against Brampton, and I was a one-man radio crew, and somebody from Brampton, he was down injured. He was down for about 7 minutes, and like Pete said earlier, you have to do your research and have stuff ready to say. Well, when you're the play-by-play guy and the color guy, and it's late in the game, you sometimes run out of stuff. So we went to our last commercial break. He was still injured, came back, and I thought, you know what, this isn't my type of humor, but somebody might find it. Somebody might find this funny, and it just popped into my head. The trainer was working on him, and all that came out of my mouth was, well, he's finally up off the floor, and they have a nice female trainer. Maybe I would have milked the injury a little longer, too, to get some attention. That was it. It's take it for what it is, but that's what I said. I didn't say I wanted to jump out on the floor. I didn't say whatever. Interpret it however you want. I go home that night and think nothing of it. There was still another period of lacrosse. I thought nothing of it. And then the next day I get ready. We're going to load up on the bus. It's a Friday night game to go to Brampton. And I get a call from the Lakers, junior Lakers. It was Tim Barry. And he said, you can't get into the arena tonight. I said, what do you mean you can't get into the arena? He said, well, Brampton's banned you. I said, how are they banning me from the arena? So Doug Arthur doesn't want you in there. I said, I don't think it's Doug Arthur's choice. Doug Arthur, the GM of Brampton. So we kind of had a back and forth. Dean McLeod was the commissioner. We couldn't get a hold of him. So it was left at, you can't call the game. The radio station I was working for at the time said, just go, try to show up. I didn't want to. I was kind of embarrassed. I just wanted to crawl into a hole. I didn't want any of this stuff. I was just, something popped out of my mouth and it blew up, unfortunately. So anyway, I don't go to Brampton, and I get a call from Mike Davies, the examiner. He starts asking me about it. Then all of a sudden, checks starts showing up. They want to film and do a story. I'm thinking, oh, man. I said yes to Mike Davies. He's always been good to me. I said no to everybody else. So I didn't do 2 or 3 other media things. And it ended up in the paper the next day, Saturday edition, banned in Brampton, the headline. Became an ongoing joke everywhere I went for the next little bit. Everyone just, anytime a female trainer went out onto the floor, everyone would look up at the booth at me, and it was a little embarrassing. And you guys ended up having to do a playoff series against Brampton at that time, and I was still banned. I had to figure out how are we going to get back into the arena. So I actually called Doug Arthur, and he said, you know what, if you just apologize, this is all over. And I said, what am I apologizing for? We had a back and forth. Tim Barry and him have a back and forth. And Tim says, Scotty, if you just apologize, it's over. And I said, I'm not apologizing. So we left it at that. The next game was a home game against Brampton. So I went down into the hallway. I talked to the trainer down there, and I said, hey, can I talk to you? I'm sorry if this is uncomfortable for you, but I don't know if you heard what had happened. And she goes, I'm not bothered by it at all. She goes, I feel so bad for you, and I accept your apology. Doug Arthur happened to hear that apology. He came out and he goes, you can come to game 3 and the rest of the series. That's how the ban was lifted. So nobody knows that. Nobody knows how it got lifted. I'd never told that story ever, but as I wandered down to the hallway because I just wanted to talk to her. Nobody had talked to her. Nobody put me into contact with her. And it just got blown so out of proportion. And I still have people bringing it up, obviously, to this day. Banned in Brampton.
I mean, in long terms, it's really one of those things now that I think most people kind of joke about. I don't really think it's considered that big of a deal now. But again, it was one of those things that I just remember, going on the bus trip one day and everyone's like, yeah, I've texted my parents. Yeah, so I don't think you're going to be able to hear the game tonight. It's just one of those things.
Banned in Brampton. Sounds like a movie.
Could be, yeah.
All right, we're gonna go to our play until the whistle segment here. It's Jake and I have a big thing with trying to promote the officials in the game of lacrosse, and there's been some incidents in the past few years, especially in the Ontario Lacrosse Association, and we want to kind of try and help out the officials. So we're gonna ask Pete first, who your favorite official is and why.
I'm going to pick an official from when I was playing back in minor lacrosse and even in a little junior. His name was Gary Martin. And I just really liked him because he was personal. He'd call you by name. And, you guys know what that's like when a referee will call you by your first name. I don't know. It's just a sign of respect a little bit, right? So I always liked him. There was a guy, Don Brocky. There's some characters over the years. Right now I'll have to go with Ecclestone because he lives here in Peterborough. And he's an interesting cat. I think he looks like a cartoon character a little bit with his helmet on. He looks like he should be in the Flintstones, but he's a good guy. He comes to our Lakers alumni euchre tournament, so I got to give him a shout out for that.
Scotty. Favorite ref? If we're going all time, if we're throwing it back, I don't know if he's a relative of yours, but Bill Fox. He's a legend back in my day, and he stayed around the game for long after my playing days. And I remember going to the rink, seeing him. But he was just one of those guys who became a legendary ref. Anytime we saw him on the floor, we knew we were going to get a fair shake, and we knew there wasn't going to be any issues. So I think anyone who played on any of my teams, Bill Fox is certainly the guy. These days, there's too many to name. They're all in just doing great jobs, and that's a good sign. When you don't know the referees and you can't name them, that means they're doing their job and just going about their business.
I told a story on the first episode of the podcast about how Foxy, at one point, I was arguing with him a little bit, and he started making jokes about how I was his kid on the floor, and one of the players from the other team whispered, "Is that actually your dad?" Just like, no, man, we just have the same last name. Come on.
No, obviously you guys sit way up top, kind of where the fans are. Fans see a different perspective of the game from what players and coaches and referees see. If there's advice that you could maybe give to fans on kind of laying off officials more at the minor level, what type of advice could you give them?
To keep your mouth shut, I guess. I don't know what it is about lacrosse parents. I don't know whether it's the atmosphere in the arena. It's different than hockey. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, you can really hear parents yell more, it seems, in a lacrosse arena than you can in a hockey arena. I guess there's less sounds. I'm not sure what the case is, but you just got to settle down. At the end of the day, you're kind of embarrassing your kid. You're embarrassing yourself, and everyone's passionate. I get it. I've got fired up. I'm not going to sit here and say I haven't got fired up at one of my son's lacrosse games before, but what I've done is you just find a nice little spot where you can just kind of watch the game and stay away from it if you feel like you're one of those parents that needs your own little area, and just have respect. These people, especially the kids. I mean, we're talking, I just saw a program the other day that came out from one of the early Laker classics. And some of the officials in there were John Grant Jr., Tracy Koleski. Like, these guys would have only been 15 or 16 at the time, right? You got to remember that. For the most part, they're just kids. If they're not kids, they're somebody's husband or wife or whatever the case may be, right? So they're all human.
Scotty?
Yeah, I think for lacrosse, I think there's a combination, a lot of factors involved that make it a little different than hockey. It's the summer. Everyone's hot. The arenas don't have air conditioning. You're angry because of that. So I think that's one factor right there. But also, you're usually in tournaments or back-to-back games, or your siblings are playing. So what are you doing? You're out in the parking lot having some sodas. And I think you get into the arena. And I'm not saying that's every person, but in my experiences, going to some of these weekend games, weekend tournaments, there's a lot of swearing and people who are just oblivious to what's going around. And that's not a lot of people. I mean, I'm not painting everyone with that brush. It's sort of the 80-20 rule where 80% are the greatest parents in the world. And then you get that 20% that sort of ruin it from everyone. But you need to stop yelling at whether it's your kid, the official, the coaches. Just sit back, enjoy. We talked about lacrosse. We talked about how there's not money involved. So why put all that pressure and all that stress when it's just a sport that everyone is playing to solely have fun? That's it.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I got a funny story, and you guys are from the Ottawa area, right? So we were down at a minor lacrosse tournament down there. I think we were playing in the Pean Saturday, hot afternoon, same sort of situation. But our coach, and it was frustrating, the referees were calling the best game in the world, and our head coach, this is just Pee Wee, I think, he got a little heated, a little hot. And as just a guy on the bench, the assistant coach, I just sort of came in and just tried to calm things down. And I was the one that ended up getting tossed from the game. And I had to make that walk of shame. I had to walk in front of their bench right across the floor to the exit. And I sort of took one for the team that particular game. But, you got to, as the assistant, sometimes you got to do that. But I remember that walk, and it was one of the worst walks of my life, even though I know I wasn't overly guilty. But it's not one you want to make.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I mean, Scott, you said it right there. Just kind of remaining calm, and then remembering that they're human as well. They're someone's husband, wife, or spouse, or whatever it may be. Just remaining calm and remembering they're human at the end of the day will probably help the game out with the officials and trying to make it a little easier on their games and kind of their job in the sport of lacrosse. So we really, really appreciate having you guys on today to talk. And get to know you guys a little bit more, and I'm sure lacrosse fans are really going to enjoy this.
Well, thanks for having us, guys. You guys, this is awesome that you're doing it, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the floor and on the ice real soon.
Yeah, same sentiments for me, guys. Can't wait for sports to get back going. But in the meantime, it's awesome coming on and chatting about the sports that we all hope are going to come back soon. And yeah, thanks for having us on. Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to episode number 6 of the Sticks and Picks Lacrosse podcast presented by Lacrosse Unlimited. A reminder to check out lacrosseunlimited.com for all your lacrosse needs. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at SticksPicksLax and on Facebook at Sticks and Picks Lacrosse for more lacrosse content and future episode dates. A reminder that another Play Until the Whistle segment will be released this Saturday with another Ontario Lacrosse official.